Hi everyone.
Greetings.
We're in the Pure Worship book, page 186. In the chapter I am against you, O GOG. The subheading says, The land. When, why, and how will GOG invade us, or invade it? It is sobering to think that soon a coalition of earthly nations will invade our precious spiritual land. Since this foretold attack will involve us as Jehovah's pure worshippers, we want to know more about it. Consider three questions that naturally arise. When will Gog of Magog invade our restored spiritual land? The prophecy answers, in the final part of the years, you will invade the land. This suggests a time close to the end of this system of things. Remember that the Great Tribulation will begin with the destruction of Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion. After false religious institutions have been destroyed, and before Armageddon begins, Gog will launch a final all-out attack on true worshippers.
Why will Gog invade the restored land of Jehovah's pure worshippers? Ezekiel's prophecy reveals two factors. First, Jehovah's guiding hand, and second, Gog's evil motives. Jehovah's guiding hand, this is the title of the next long paragraph. It says, first of all, read 38 verses 4 and 16, which we'll do in a minute. Notice what Jehovah says to Gog, I will put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring you against my land. Do those words mean that Jehovah will force the nations to attack his own worshippers? Of course not. He would never cause evil to befall his people. But Jehovah knows his enemies, that they will hate pure worshippers and will not be able to resist an opportunity to try to wipe them out. As if putting hooks in Gog's jaws and leading him along, Jehovah will guide matters so that events will unfold according to his will and timetable. At some point, following the destruction of Babylon the Great, Jehovah may in some way lure the nations into carrying out what is already in their hearts. Jehovah will thus set the stage for the attack that leads to Armageddon, Earth's greatest war. Then he will deliver his people, magnify his sovereignty, and sanctify his holy name.
Gog's evil motives is the next section. The nations will devise an evil plan. They will seek to vent their long-standing rage and hatred on Jehovah's worshippers, who will seem vulnerable, as if living in settlements unprotected by walls, bars, and gates. The nations will also be eager to take much spoil and plunder from those who are accumulating wealth. What wealth? Jehovah's people have great spiritual wealth. Our most precious possession is our pure worship, which we give to Jehovah alone. The nations will seek to plunder pure worship, not because they value it, but because they hate it and all who promote it. How will Gog invade the spiritual land or paradise? The nations may try to disrupt our way of life and stop us from carrying out our worship. To that end, perhaps they will try to interrupt the flow of spiritual food, prevent us from meeting together, break up the unity we enjoy, and stop us from zealously proclaiming God's message. All those are elements of the spiritual paradise. Egged on by Satan, the nations will try to efface true worshippers, and along with them pure worship from the earth.
The coming attack by Gog of Magog will affect all true worshippers in the God-given spiritual land. How thankful we are that Jehovah has warned us about what is just ahead. Meanwhile, as we await the Great Tribulation, may we be determined to uphold pure worship, giving it priority in our lives, and by so doing we will contribute to the beauty of the the restored land. That's what it says, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of the restored land. And
we will contribute to the beauty of the restored land now.
now.
I don't know. Okay.
I've marked it in such a way that I can't read it anymore.
Okay.
And we will put ourselves in line to witness something truly spectacular in the near future. How Jehovah will stand up for his people and his holy name in Armageddon, as the next chapter will explain.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of words, and it boils down to a bunch of phrases, really, that we isolated last time, some of them anyway. And those phrases, the repeated phrases, are spiritual land, restored true worship, true worshippers,
Pure worshippers.
pure worshippers. Well, let's not forget the world empire, false religion here.
Yeah.
These are phrases that your literature is loaded with, but none of which are in the Bible. For instance, the definition of Babylon is the world empire, false religion, not in the text about Babylon the Great in Revelation. But all the other ones aren't in it either. They're certainly not in Gog and Magog here. It talks about a land. It talks about a coalition of nations. You're right about that. A land, a coalition of nations gathered around that land, attacking that land, but it's never a spiritual land or a spiritual paradise or any of this stuff.
Yeah, you've got restored spiritual land, but that's, you're talking about applying it to yourself, and it's not restored.
What's restored about the spiritual paradise?
You were created.
This was created in 1879 by one man, and you recreated it under another man in 1919, the so-called theocracy. It was recreated again with the governing body attached in the 1970s, and was recreated in the last decade by a governing body which is now the FDS. This amorphous creature, this corporation that you serve and are enslaved by, is not like the Jehovah of the Old Testament that you're talking about here, who continually says in the prophets, I am and there is no one else. I am and I do not change. But you've got a creature that continually changes, yet you continue to serve him as inconsistencies.
And you just redefine all the words then. Land isn't really land, it's spiritual land.
Yes, an amorphous creature that you're serving that reserves the right to itself, exclusive to itself, to define all the terms of the Bible the way it wants to.
Yeah.
So restored is the wrong word. What you have done is create a spiritual reality and then recreate that spiritual reality over and over again.
I don't know whether it's real.
Then there's the verses you've picked. Again, phrases from verses. And what are the verses they've cited?
Yeah, they say only to read Ezekiel 38, verses 4 and 16. And partially they quote. Right?
Well, let's read the entire verses they actually cite here.
Okay,
Tell you to read.
Verse 4 says, I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws and bring you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in splendor, a vast assembly with large shields and bucklers, all of them wielding swords.
Why have they left out all these military details? Although, maybe we shall show them the picture, the double spread here, across these two pages.
Put it up, because I can't get that close.
Just hold on to that for a second. I got to hold this up to the camera. Maybe you can put the screen back on.
Okay, wait, which one's that one? Down here.
This picture. Yeah, this picture. Look closely at it, and you'll see the military and obviously politicians. Two or three of them are smoking, by the way, so a dig in there. But what's on the table?
All over the table, and when you look closely at it, you can see it's Watchtower literature.
And on the screen at the back,
you've got two witnesses out in the witness work. You've got the telecast.
The telecast in the background, yes.
JW org, and then buildings, which I would assume are kingdom halls and Bethels, places like that.
So what's the overall message? What's this not so subliminal message?
You've got them, I think it's just totally delusional. You've got all these military people all over the world thinking about you and plotting against you.
And when you think about that and then add to the verses, your use of these verses after that, something about they're interested in your spiritual wealth.
Yeah.
They want to stop you from spreading
Yeah.
your spiritual wealth around, something like this?
So we should read
what's
the
the
other
verse?
verse that they mentioned was 16. 38 verse 16. Like clouds covering the land, you will come against my people Israel. Well, you can see why they only partially quote that one. In the final part of the days, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I sanctify myself through you before their eyes, O GOG.
So, yeah, delusional is not too strong a word. You've got them paying attention to you, and all we have to do is read the headlines today to realize what the world is paying attention to.
And then they mention at the very end of that paragraph, 38 verse 23, and I think in context that one's going to be a problem too. They don't even partially quote that one, they just refer to it. So that says, and I will certainly magnify myself and sanctify myself and make myself known before the eyes of many nations, and they will have to know that I am Jehovah. So it's not Israel that's doing it or Gog, it's God himself is the one who sanctifies himself and witnesses to himself. And it's what he does that makes him known to all nations.
I thought it was ironic that they should put in paragraph 20, when they're speculating about what Gog may do, assuming that Gog is all these nations that are preoccupied with what you're doing in the Watchtower. To that end, perhaps they will try to interrupt the flow of spiritual food, prevent us from meeting together, break up the unity we enjoy, stop us from zealously proclaiming God's message.
They haven't had to do that because you've done it yourself.
The parallel is with, of course, Russell's day, when the world didn't have to stop Russell. He died suddenly. And within 10 years, his books, you stopped printing them. And similarly, in recent decades.
And even what he wrote made it stop.
It was what he said that stopped it. It wasn't what the world did to him. And the same with Second World War Rutherford's books. You stopped printing them.
Yeah.
They became an embarrassment to you. And now you've stopped even printing what Nora and Franz published. And you're stuck with what you've got now with meager rations. I mean, the weekly rations they get now. You think of this as being fed spiritually? You're being fed by Jehovah?
You yourself have cut back the publications. You yourself have cut back on your meetings. Nobody had to do this.
Nobody forced you.
You do it yourself. And you also are making it less demanding for people to go door to door. So you've cut some of your rules about that.
But then there's the problem of who is the world paying attention to nowadays. And you see in that the fulfillment of prophecy. I'm just going to read verses they don't cite here for reasons that will become obvious. Here's what Zechariah has to say about what the world is paying attention to. This is Zechariah 12, verses 2 and 3, and also 14. Zechariah 12:2. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. And then in 14, verses 2 to 4, for I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then Yahweh will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on the day of battle. On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall split in two from the east to the west by a very great valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward and the other half southward. It's very plain that God's intervention here, the Lord coming and standing visibly on the Mount of Olives, will be about a certain situation on earth and a certain people on earth. And it will involve geographical and topographical changes.
Yeah.
So Yeah, delusional is not too strong
Yeah.
a word. You have everybody paying attention to what you're doing. All you have to do
Yeah.
is look at the headlines in the newspapers and on television to see what the world is really paying attention to.
Yeah. I think this really illustrates too the way they do Bible study. You know, partial verses, redefining everything to be spiritual, and misapplying texts. You know, so one of the references in paragraph 18 was this. You know, would God be the one that's causing GOG to do this attack against God's people? And of course not, they say. And they say he would never cause evil to befall his people. And they reference Job 34.
What's wrong with that?
Well, because Job 34 is Elihu, who is one of the ones that is accusing Job of having to have done something bad, and that's why this is happening to him. So this is just bad. A bad way of looking at Scripture, just finding a verse that says something that you like, but not looking at the context at all.
Yeah, they're not alone in this, but they're outstanding at it, which
Yeah.
is taking text out of context.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse,
Yeah.
much worse than it was when Fred Franz was writing your books on prophecy.
Yeah. They're quoting less, and they're quoting it out of sequence. It's just been illustrated all through this book.
Yeah. So what's our link?
We're linking to a video called "Why Don't JWs Notice They're Starving and Enduring Endless, Even Terminal Boredom." I think it was a video where you talk about when you were the year you were baptized?
The year I was burped? No, the year I was baptized. So yes, I was born.
Yeah.
According to this analogy. What were the books published in that year? Guess what was published in 1971, 1 year? The Aid to Bible Understanding, Complete Edition. The No Jehovah book, where they discuss the book of Ezekiel in the last generation.
Mm-hmm.
400 pages, by the way, not 200 with pictures. And the Theocratic School Guidebook. And
the one about for the kids.
Listening to the Great Teacher.
Yeah.
So there were 4 or 5 books, not to mention
At one
one
assembly.
of them being the aid book. So
And because you were a new witness, you thought, wow, this is great.
wow, all in 1 year. But of course, I was not to know that would never happen again, and it's certainly not happening today.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see you next time for starting a new chapter, right?
Yes, my great rage will flare up. Yeah, you have the...
Next time. Oh, I've got the mouse. She's pointing at the mouse here.
Okay.
See you then.
Bye.